I just want to say, don't die and speak out. We have very many networks of people living with HIV, and even speaking out sometimes opens you up to network with larger groups. I have traveled globally because of my HIV.
Hi guys, welcome to My Story TV 254. I'm your host Koimwangi, and I'm very happy today. I have a new co-host. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi guys, I'm your host Vero Kamau. I'm happy to be part of My Story TV 254. Thank you for having me.
We have a guest with us, and I'd like her to introduce herself. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Mildred Waboi Macharia, and I am happy to share my story with you today. The story I want to share with you today is about my journey with HIV, how I started or how I got to know my status. My story starts long before when I was younger. I was only 20 years old, and I got married young. I got to know about my HIV status when my daughter was born. I was in Australia. I was in school, but I met the love of my life, and as expected, the next thing I wanted to do was get married to him, and the outcome was the baby, and I was very happy, just like everyone else. But when I came back to Kenya is when I got to know that there was something wrong with my daughter, because she was getting sick. Her name was Brenda. She was getting very sick, and we started going for checkups. We go to this hospital today, we are in Gertrude, we are in Nairobi hospital, we are back again, until they decided to test her for HIV. And for me, it was not something I would have expected, because one, I'm a lawyer and my husband was a pilot, and they had said that this infection can only be the sex workers and that. So they never took us through counseling. They just tested the child, and then one day I was called by the pediatrician, and I went to Nairobi hospital, and she told me to go with my husband, and I couldn't, because he had come very late. He was working with the armed forces. And when I went alone, the first thing she did was to ask me why I had gone alone. And I said because my husband was sick. I was working, and of course I lied. He had been out. But then after that, I was just given the results. And the results, I was told the child has AIDS. And I asked, have you told the parents? She said, no, these are Brenda's results. I said, no, they can't be. How? You have not tested her. And again, Brenda was not born here. So how can you suddenly say that she's HIV positive? And she was born in the best place, the best hospital, Warwick Hospital in Australia. And of course, that hit me bad, and I got into denial. The first thing I did was to get out of the doctor's consulting room. And I ran. I just kept walking, and I found myself in town. I had forgotten everything, even my handbag. I don't know how I got to GPO, but I only came back to when I saw a telephone booth, and I realized that I have to call my people before. When I go to GPO, there's that building called Empire Plaza, and when I saw a telephone booth that was right there, and it occurred to me I should let my people know that what was happening. That is the point where I realized I didn't even have my handbag. I'd left it in the doctor's clinic. And then it took some time before I remembered that I could make a reverse call. And when it did finally, it was my big sister who answered the phone. And I told her, the doctor has said we are dying. She asked, which doctor, where are you? But when I looked in front of me, what I saw were Kenya buses. So I told her I was at the bus station. But the truth is I was at GPO. But fortunately, she asked me, where exactly in bus station are you at? And then I said, I turned, I saw a sign and I said, Koinange Street. And now, fortunately, she was able to find me at that point.
What happened when your sister came?
Oh, when my sister came, of course, she was very emotional. She didn't know what was going on. But the first thing she felt was to go back to the doctor's place. And we went back to the clinic, and then the doctor explained to her everything. Of course, it was very hard. I could not imagine how this could have happened. And then she took me home. And when I got home is when I found my husband had already woken up and was just there watching TV. And that is the first time it occurred to me. And where could this thing have come from before I got married? And this is as a disease that I had had. It's not for, it is for sex workers and people like that. And then again, my daughter was born in Australia, and he has gone to school, he's a pilot, he's doing the Air Force, and I just thought instantly, it is for me. And I poured all the coffee he was thinking of him, and then he was like, oh, I'm sorry, and then for me that was like a confirmation, oh, so you knew about it. And you can imagine now from that, it was a long journey. It was very painful, it was a very hard one, because every morning I would look at my daughter and I don't know what to do. I started going to other hospitals to retest because I got into denial. I went to all the hospitals testing in Nairobi, and every time I'm like, no, there was some mix up with the lab. It cannot be my daughter's. And we had to live with that until I had to accept that.
And how old was your daughter at this particular time?
Oh, for the reason why my daughter was getting sickly, she was 3 years old, and mainly what she was suffering from was a chest infection. Because today it's pneumonia, she finishes the treatment, then she has a fever again, and then we are back again. But this time now, she was tested for TB. And she was good.
At what time did you decide now to take the HIV test you yourself?
Well, from the first time now, this time now, I'm on denial. Every time, everywhere my daughter is being tested, I was tested. And there's also something I've not told you. I went so deep into denial that I left the country again. And I went to test outside Kenya because I felt like in Kenya they don't have the capacity to test. She was born in Australia. There they didn't say, how come suddenly in Kenya this is where they know how to test is. And they're telling me AIDS. There was no word like HIV there. And you can imagine, I'm talking about 1992.
So you,
1993, yes.
so you thought that Kenya's lab were not correct?
Yes. So I went testing, I went to Seychelles, then I went to Singapore, and then I went back to Australia, where she was born. And at that point is when they told me, yes, we had known when we were still expecting the baby that you are HIV positive. But why didn't you tell me all the 9 months? Said that is why we had to do an epidural cesarean. An epidural cesarean is a cesarean that is done when you are awake. But of course you cannot feel the pain. And my husband had known all along. And he said that they should not disclose to me because I was not strong enough. I was still quite young. He was 10 years older than me. And again, I was still in school, and here I am pregnant. And he said he'd tell me the right time. But then that time I got myself thinking, and now my daughter is 3 years old, and still he has not found time to tell. Then I got thinking. And when I came back to Kenya, there's only one thing I wanted to know. Did he know about his HIV status before we got married, while we were married, or only when I was pregnant? That was the longest journey I had to take back. And don't forget, I was with my daughter. And all this time I'm spending. Meaning, I'm not saving, I'm spending my savings. So even the money is getting finished. And that was the longest flight because when I had told my husband that we were on the way, and of course I found him at the airport. And the only thing I wanted to know from him was that, did you know that you were HIV positive before we got married? And he said no. He said no. And I was like, at least it was good. He didn't know. Then we went home. Okay, so when we got home, it was like now I had to come back to reality. Yes, this has happened. And now my daughter was sick from the traveling and all. We couldn't go to our kawaida. We couldn't go to our kawaida hospitals because of the cost. And now we had to go to the Armed Forces Memorial Hospital, where my daughter was admitted, and of course now started on the TB treatment. Of course she got very sick, and it was at a time when the stigma was at its highest, and she, at that point, she had lost a lot of weight, and then because she had tested positive, and now everybody in the hospital was talking about it, so we were put in an isolation ward. The people, the children who had HIV, and that, I think that was the hardest thing for me to face, because what was happening is that every person coming to visit, they are sick. They had to take a tour to come and also see AIDS. And this is not just anybody's child they were looking at. It is my daughter's child, my daughter. So it was very painful. And of course, even the other patients felt that their sicknesses were better than Brenda's. And of course, they kept staring. I had to harden up, and also I would hit back. If I would find you looking at me, I would attack you and ask you, what are you looking at? Everybody came to hospital for their own sicknesses. Those ones who get sick, who die, they will die. Those ones who get well, they go home. Mind your own business. Yeah. And I feel good about that.
So it means you got bitter because of the disease,
the stigma
that was there. How did you deal with that?
Well, the reality came back when you see when you're talking about HIV. Now I know these things because I'm a counselor. It has coping stages. Those are stages you have to go through. But I was going through these stages without a counselor. And now here I am with a child. If it was me, I think it would have been better. But when we are talking about my baby here, and everybody is staring at my child, and me as a mother, I am desperate. I am helpless. There's nothing I can do. There's no treatment. What she's getting is, TB was injections that time. So she was getting injected every day. This side, tomorrow it is this side. Then even my daughter was hating me. She was even preparing when the father comes for the visit. So that is when now the head colonel doctor came and asked me, Mama Brenda, what is wrong with you? You are being so hard on us. It's as if we are the ones who give this child AIDS. Wewe na Meja Mwalili ni watu wamesoma. Why did you decide to have a baby when you know you are HIV positive? Then I told her, no, we didn't know. No, I am the one who personally tested Meja Mwalili when we went for the peacekeeping mission in Namibia. That is when, in 1988. So I was like, oh, so this man knew his status even before we got married. And you can imagine, that night I couldn't sleep. I was rehearsing how I'm going to insult him when he comes in the morning. Then in the morning I saw him coming with the bags, the usual, the Uji and the diapers and things. And when he came, everything I had practiced evaporated. I just told him, you have killed us, now go and look for others and finish. If that is what you have decided, you are going to kill everybody. But I'm going to tell on you. I'm going to tell everybody about it. But the whisper in which I said it, I think it was so painful because, and even to take those things with you, I don't think we need them because we are dying in. So he retreated with his bags. Of course, he didn't go home with them. He left them at the reception. And also, we also needed them, so we still went for them. So now it was a situation where I still needed to see my husband because I still needed him. There was some supplies he was bringing every morning, so we still had to come. And of course, my daughter was looking forward to the visit. So every time, and you see in Memorial Hospital, they are uniformed. So every time he sees somebody coming in or being saluted, that and clearly. So it was a very hard time for me. And there's no way I could have told him, "Wachana na hiki ukimsema sasa ukipapati kizuri, no, you can't do that." So it was so hard. And then also the stigma was coming from people who are close to me. Many people, even friends, they had suspected, and then things spread. And also at one point, when I was still in denial, I had called many people, telling them, "I'm so sorry, there's nothing. I brought you from Australia, but don't worry." Others I would give money, others I would just share things, because I knew we were going. Nobody had told me that we were not going to die. There was no counseling, so I was just doing this. So these people used to visit me, and then they would it's an interview. It's not a hospital visit, it's a hospital, it's an interview. So unasikia mtu anakuuliza, "Na sasa mtoto anaendeleaje?" Namwambia vizuri. Na daktari anasema nini? Namwambia ni kifua tu atapona. Na wewe hasa ukiangalia sana unaona kama nini. So when somebody asks you that, you know what direction they are coming from. So others would say, "Alisema atakufa." I'm also bitter. Alisema atakufa tu. Then also there's the pain of my husband, and I still loved him as my husband, and we were a young couple, and I had said, in sickness and in health. But then I was still asking myself, even this sickness, even this, I was hurt. I was so.
And what did your parents say or take the fact that you were HIV positive?
My mom told me, of course she got it to deny. I'm her last born. I'm in a family of 12. I'm the baby. So she just said, you can't have that. That disease is in Nanyuki town. Our home is Nanyuki. So there's no way you can have that. In any case, where you mesoma, wachana nao, what are you doing? You are okay. Yeah, and that was it.
But
that was fine.
They supported you.
Of course. My family have been always a great supporter. And then after the treatment for TB, we were discharged. At that point, I decided I'm not going back to that marriage, and I went home to my people. But then there's the issue of my daughter. My daughter was crying all the time. She wants her dad. They were very close. Or she wants this toy, or she wants her bed, or she wants her cup, or she wants her space, such. So at one point I thought, let me sneak her home, at least she'll feel good. But you can imagine, even when I got home, I was like, this is still my home. So I'm looking for a kitchen, kama anapikaga, ama kuna nguo zingine zenye si zangu and that. But still I felt I cannot stay. And that is where I decided I have to go. And it was not easy.
At this particular time, how was your daughter?
Health-wise, she had improved, and she was doing well, and well, children get sick and then suddenly get well. After TB treatment, she became okay again, and then when she was 4, she was still okay, so I took her to kindergarten. And of course we had bought her bags and her new uniform. She was so excited about that, and like every other child. And she had slept even with her uniform. But when we got to the school, because by that time I had gone public about my status. Yes, because this time it was 1996. And I'd already taken Professor Bell to court because of the Pearl Omega. We had taken the Pearl Omega drug. He had said we'd get well. Then after 6 months, you are still taking the medicine. You go testing, then you are positive. You are still positive.
What made you decide now to put your HIV status on public?
I had never decided to take. But when we got to courts, the media was there. Yeah, so they put it in the headline. Each victim challenges the other drug. So my neighbors got to know. So I would go to church at that point. Now I've come to church to ask God to heal my daughter. Even if it is to leave me, it's okay. But at least to heal my daughter. You open your eyes and nobody is sitting next to you. They moved from the bed.
Stigmatization was there
high.
for real.
And then when it comes to offering, they would not bring us the basket. And my daughter would go running after the basket. She wanted to put the pesa for Jesus. But they would lift it higher. And then she comes, she said, no, don't worry, we will give him next time. And we would go home, and she would feel so bad because the other children had done that. And it was not possible for her to do that.
And she was very young.
She was young, but she had started knowing that some things are different. Because like when we would go back to the estate, she wants to play with the other children. And then every parent comes and takes their children, come and take porridge. But then she would say, but nimeona, I saw that he had taken porridge, he still had porridge here. Said no, he had to take a second one. Because you see, when he takes second, it's very strong. And my daughter had so many toys we had brought from Australia. So her things were unique. The other children want, but their parents don't want. And she was an only child, so she also wants the other children. But the worst thing came when I took her to school. After the excitement of sleeping in her uniform and the bag. And then the other parents came. I don't know how they got to know
the information
that my daughter was getting to that kindergarten. And they came and they said, if she comes to this school, then our daughter's out. And I had gone and dropped her. So by 10, here I am. I was trying to organize, like a small thing for her, the first day in school. And then I hear the door to go open. It's my daughter. And she's telling, she was brought by the teacher, and she's telling me, Mom, I've not even eaten the snack. I had packed for her even a snack, and she was so excited she's going to eat in school. She has a bag, though it was empty, of course, like a snack bag. But she had not even stayed. But the parents had said that she was going to infect their children at the swings. So my daughter was brought home. And that is how now she had to do homeschool.
At an age of 4?
Yeah, though she used to say, I want to go to the other school. I would tell her this one is better because when you get bored, you can watch cartoon, Tom and Jerry, and then you can lie on my bed and jump.
So you decided to advise her?
How do you as a child who has gone out to play with the other children and they don't want children just tell her come and play with mommy. You remove all the
mommy is the best.
Yes, you lie on the carpet, we play, and then the child forgets.
Were you the one homeschooling her?
No, it was another, actually a friend of mine who was also HIV positive. I don't want to mention her name, but she's also very public. It's unfortunate that she got sick again after her 5th birthday, and this time it was still her chest. And then I think she had also developed ulcers. And now we were admitted, and we stayed through Christmas. And I remember that Christmas we were still in the hospital, at Memorial Hospital. And then she passed on. It was 5 years, 1 month. After the funeral, it was just the two of us. And of course, before that, I'd asked my husband 1,000 times, why did you not tell me that you had been tested for HIV? And the excuse he was saying is that he also was in denial because he felt that it was something they did so that he could not go to the Kosovo peacekeeping mission. But I think he had known because I found very many drugs, like he had been sick on and off. Though he was not sick, like it was not ARVs because there were no ARVs. But then my daughter died in 1997. We moved, and now we are still coping. I'm still in depression, but now we started this movement of Ambassadors of Hope, and I had to travel to be trained in Zambia with the other Ambassadors of Hope from Africa. That way now we were being trained on how to advocate for our space, to have national networks in all the countries. But now here I come back from Zambia and I found my husband. He has not even come for me in the airport. And he sees me with my bags and then he says, "Oh, tunaenda airport." I looked at him, I saw he was not drunk, but then he was confused. And that time I got to understand he had already got the fungal infection of the brain, and he died in January of 1999. And at the age of 28, I became a widow and a mother of a deceased.
And how was your life after now the true death?
Me, what I felt I had to do is to make sure that there is no other child to be born with HIV. So I continued with my publicity. Let me say publicity. I used to go to KBC. I would go to, of course, I would get invited. You know, they were excited bringing this AIDS victim, you know, to show to the people to Wakona Ukimwi. And of course, Mimi, I didn't have the features because of
they expected that thin person.
Yeah, they wanted the thin ones, but me, I was not thin, but at least I was speaking out. And it was very hard. It was not easy. It was not easy. And of course, with the relatives now, the in-laws, your husband has died, you are young, they think you want their property, they think you want their things in inheritance, so things become bad, and then you are like...
And being a widow at 28, how did you cope with that?
It was so difficult because, you see, as sick as he was, and as much as... because already I had started healing. I had met other people who are living with HIV. I had now started traveling out, meeting other people from other countries, and I had seen people who can also live with HIV. I was annoyed. I was very lonely, and of course at this time I was very hurt. I was very hurt because he had died at a time where now things were getting better. Already we had bought ARVs. The ARVs had now come to Kenya, and it was at a cost of 120. Though we did not know how they were to be taken because of the cost. He would take them when he has a cough, and then he's not taking tomorrow. Then if it is me, I feel I have a sore throat, and then it's me who's taking the same ones.
So you never knew the prescriptions?
There was none. That during that time, in fact, you imported them. So even they are not coming with them. And then again, sometimes you get a monotherapy. You know, there's supposed to be combined therapy. So what I was hurting because I felt like he brought the virus, and now he has gone. He has left me with the problems, you know, to face the world alone at that age.
Did you decide to get married again, or you were just like that? Decided not to get married again?
At this point, I have to be honest and say that I never remarried, and Brenda was my only child. I never got another child. But I thank God that I managed to live free at this age 51, because coming back from the age 20, and now I am celebrating being 50. I thank God for that. Many people have died, so for me, I feel it's a privilege for me to have lived to even meet people, because I believe even that time maybe you were not born. Why? Were you born then?
No, I was not born.
So you see, so I have, even you have been born when I have the virus, and you have lived, and here you are giving me an interview. That's a privilege.
Yeah.
And you see, even today people are still getting infected,
Yeah.
and it is very unfortunate because as much so much information is out there, but people still engage sexually without protection, have children not going for prevention to mother transmission. Though now I think that the government of Kenya has to test everybody who is pregnant, but now there's also the pregnancies that are done at home. And it's also unfortunate that people still get married before they are tested.
Yes.
If I had been tested before marriage, I would have known that there was HIV.
What advice would you give people who maybe want to get married? Would you tell them to test first before marriage?
Yes, that is what I insist. You must know your partner's HIV status. If you don't want to go together to a VCT center, we also have the self-test kits that are available in the chemist. If it is the stigma of walking into a center, unaenda tu kwa chemist, you buy at affordable cost, and you can test yourself at home. And again, I would advise at this point is that not to abuse the self-test kit. Some people have bought them and forced their girlfriends to test, others forcing their house girls to test, others even, we have the Olo swab. They test their husbands when they come home drunk. You know, they just go swab it and you test it. That is without his consent, of course. And then the others start killing each other because when he's test positive, you kill him. But that, you see, people, something else people should understand is that going for a HIV test doesn't mean that you're going to get the virus then. It is already in you. You will just be getting to know that the virus is in you. Yeah, but it is not that the test is. So what will happen? Supposing I had not known my status early enough, I would be dead. Because I stayed without the ARVs for 15 years. And by the time I was on the 15th year, 15th year, without the ARVs, I already had TB and a cancer called Kaposi sarcoma that is related to HIV, but that can be treated with ARVs. So today I am viral load 0, meaning I can even remarry and have children who are negative. But what is important is to know your status when you take your treatment. Unfortunately, many people are still scared of a HIV test. And when you get the test, it will be better for you because you'll be put on treatment and not die. Others go for testing only when they are hospitalized, when their immunity is so bad that they end up dying. So for me, my sharing my story is to encourage somebody somewhere that if you are living with the virus, don't stay alone. And if you know you're HIV negative, please stay negative. Yes.
And Mildred, we have seen you going to many countries, like East Africa. You have visited a lot of countries. What are you advocating?
Well, of course, we advocate for the rights of people living with HIV, and I also advocate for TB treatment, prevention, screening. You know, everything, like with HIV, everything has fallen into place. Because like now, if you want to be tested, you just walk in, treatment is free, testing is free, and the drugs are free. And there's even the viral load screening, there's even the follow-up, everything is done, it's well. And if we had not advocated for this, this would not have been done. But the good thing is that we have a global network of people living with HIV, which is broken to regional and now to countries. And we are all members of the global network. This year, this month, we were supposed to be attending the International AIDS Conference, but because of coronavirus, that is not going to be possible, and it will be the first year since 1989 that we have not attended a conference. It is never specifically to a specific country. So I've traveled to many countries. And also try to tell you something, and this is positive, this is to encourage you. I just want to say, don't die alone. Speak out. We have very many networks of people living with HIV, and even speaking out sometimes opens you up to network with larger groups. I have traveled globally because of my HIV status. I don't want to say it as an advantage, but I think if I didn't have the virus, I wouldn't have been able to shake hands with Nelson Mandela. I've met Kenneth Kaunda. I met Nkosi Johnson before he died. I've met many people living with HIV who are prominent. And I've also had the privilege of doing the Pamoja Tuangamize campaign, the national campaign in Kenya. You have seen me holding hands with President, with who, saying Pamoja Tuangamize Ukimwi.
What advice can you give people who are HIV positive and they're watching you? Just look at the camera.
Okay, for people who are living with HIV, I want to tell you you're not alone. Look for us. You find us. We have the national network. It is called NEFAC. Look for us. You'll find many of us there who can. We have even WhatsApp groups that is national. We can where we chat. Our ways out. We chat our small things. We talk. We wake each other. We remind each other to take medicine. We remind you if you have a problem. You ask. We will tell you what we have gone through. We share, and that is not. Don't die alone. Because even that, locking yourself in, will eat you up. But sharing, actually you live long. When you speak out, it's a problem solved. So for me, it's to encourage you, live positively, follow your treatments as you're controlled by your doctor, and also for those ones who are HIV negative, remain HIV negative. Eat well, take care of yourself, and stay safe even from coronavirus. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming and sharing your story together with us. You're welcome. Thank you for watching our story.
Don't forget to subscribe by clicking the red button below.
And stay tuned for part 2 of Mildred Masharia's story.
Have been your host, Vero Kamau.
And your host, Koimwangi. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to